Okay, hi everyone. So this is a revision tutorial to do with changing music to a different style. I'm trying to find maybe a better way of describing this presentation, but that is essentially what we're doing here. But the actual learning outcome for junior cycle that we're going to be working with has quite a lengthy name, so we'll just go straight onto this here. So you're all familiar with learning outcomes, and the learning outcomes you have to be familiar with and what you have to have done by the end of 3 years of junior cycle music. And the specific learning outcome we are dealing with here is learning outcome 2.3, which is we have to adapt excerpts or motifs or themes from an existing piece of music by changing its feel, style, or underlying harmony. What we're doing in this lesson, and this is the great thing about junior cycle music, is that we are also taking what we learned, and it can be applicable to other learning outcomes, quite a few in this case actually, across the three different strands of learning. Okay, so, but this is the specific one we're dealing with here. Okay, so what we're going to do is, and what we did in class, is we took a pop song and we changed it to a jazz song. Now, again, we dealt with jazz, but that doesn't mean that every school in the country or every music teacher will do it this way, okay? Some schools may take a classical piece of music and turn it into a rock song, or some people may take a reggae piece of music and turn it into a baroque piece of music. There's so many different options, and we're not restricted in what we have to do. And the style of music we have to change our piece to is not prescribed or proscribed by the State Exams Commission or anybody like that. We can do what we want, which is fantastic. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're going to take a pop song and turn it into a jazz song. The song we ended up doing was "Let It Be" by the Beatles. We'll come back to that a little bit later in the tutorial. But first of all, jazz. What is jazz? There's the definition there, a kind of a very, very broad or loose definition. Jazz is a style of music which emerged in America around the beginning of the 20th century, and you can see the rest of it there. Okay. Now, before just moving on to the next slide here. Now, in class, I played this for you. I'm not going to play this video here. You can play this if you like. Actually, I will play this very briefly because it's not too short. We looked at three or four main characteristics of jazz music and what makes jazz music jazz music. Why does jazz music sound like jazz music? And why does classical music sound like classical music? Why does baroque music sound like baroque music, and so on? And we've looked at these various different genres or styles of music, and each style has its own particular traits or characteristics that makes it sound the genre that it sounds like. One of the big things about jazz music is that it incorporates swing rhythm as opposed to straight rhythm. Now, this tutorial, as you'll see here, I will play a little bit of it here, and we have two very simple bars of music, and it's a repeated rhythmic pattern here, or an ostinato. And what you see there is two quavers crotchet, two quavers crotchet, two quavers crotchet again, which we would normally play as ti ti ta, ti ti ta, ti ti ta, ti ti ta. A swing rhythm, so what we just played there was a straight rhythm. We can swing that rhythm, and what that does is it just slightly delays the second quaver in every group of two quavers. Okay, that's if we're swinging the quavers. So instead of ti ti ta, we have ti ti ta, ti ti ta, ti ti ta, ti ti ta, and so on. Okay, I'll just play a little bit of this video. Okay, so there's a straight rhythm played on the drum kit. You can hear the cymbals there. In that case, the hi-hat is just playing ti-ti-ta, ti-ti-ta. And here's the swing equivalent. Okay, so you can hear the difference there. Now, that is available as well in your notes. You can spend as much time doing that as you want, okay? So that's one of the first characteristics of jazz music, that we quite often incorporate swing rhythm as opposed to straight rhythm. Okay, moving on. Oops, no, we don't want that. The next one. Okay, the second characteristic of jazz music we discussed is improvisation. Now, you have a definition of it again there, but improvisation is essentially creating composing music on the spot to accompany the underlying harmony that you're playing to. In this case, like a chord sequence. So it's not just kind of, notes randomly plucked from the air, or like a jazz piano player won't improvise by simply just throwing our hands on the piano and hoping that the notes work. Likewise with a guitar player. The guitar player won't just kind of pick notes randomly on the fretboard and start plucking strings in the hope that they work. There is a structure and there is a process to how you improvise. It's a lifelong pursuit to kind of master improvisation. It's not something you teach to somebody in a couple of weeks, okay? But the basics of it are, these are absolutely the basics. There's a lot more to it than this. Generally speaking, you look at whatever the chord structure underneath the music is. Instead of just taking the melody line, taking notes from those chords and kind of arranging them differently. And you can use passing notes, you can use auxiliary notes, you can use chromatic riffs and stuff like that. But essentially, once you know what notes are in each chord, you can rearrange those notes to create your own melody to go over the harmony. Now again, I know this is a revision tutorial. You will remember in class, we got into it in a lot more detail, but that is in essence what improvisation is. Okay, but it is not easy. Okay, it is a real kind of, it's a difficult subject to master. Okay, so I suppose what we did in class is we looked at a typical jazz chord progression. So up to now, a lot of the compositions we've done have focused just on the use of primary chords. They are the chords of 1, 4, and 5 in a major key. In jazz, a very common chord progression is 2, 5, 1. Quite typically, we'd have a bar of 2, a bar of 5, and 2 bars of 1. Okay, now that's not to say that every single jazz piece of music follows that chord progression. It doesn't, but it's a very common one. Much in the same way as 1, 4, 5, 1 would be quite popular in pop music, as would like 1, 6, 4, 5 be popular in pop music. Those kind of progressions. 2, 5, 1 is a really significant and popular chord progression in jazz music. Okay, and in class we play through these chords. You can take out your ukulele if you want now, or if you've got an instrument there at home, you can play through those chords. So I've given you an example of 2, 5, 1 in the key of G. So 2, 5, 1 in G would be A minor, D, going to G. Okay. The third characteristic of jazz music that we listen out for is syncopation. Okay, so syncopation means to emphasize the offbeat notes. Okay, so for example, in a normal straight rhythm, we would place the melody notes on beats 1, 2, 3, and 4 of a bar. With syncopation, we kind of use the notes in between 1, 2, and 3, 4 with our rhythms. So for example, let's say I'm just tapping out a pulse here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. If I was to put my melody or my rhythm on those beats, I'd get. Now I'm going to keep the pulse going. So here's my pulse, and I'm going to put in a syncopated rhythm here. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So you see, I've put the rhythms in between beats 1, 2, 3, and 4. This happens quite often in jazz music where we take the melody. So for example, let's say Let It Be. Let's say we're to sing Let It Be. Now I know the Beatles version of it does have some syncopation in it. That, like, again, this is not to say that no pop music has syncopation. It does. Syncopation exists in all genres of music, okay? And likewise, jazz music does not contain nothing but syncopation. It has regular rhythms on the beat as well. But let's say you take Let It Be, and let's just suppose, and I know it's not exactly like this, let's say Let It Be, the song we listened to, let's say it was all on the beat. Okay, I'm going to get the melody. I'm just going to tap the pulse here, and I'm going to sing the melody, just putting the melody, the tune, on beats 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, 2, 3, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. You can hear I am putting in some notes in between 1 and 2, but the main stress of the vowel of the words are on the main beats. Whereas if I syncopate that, I could have 3, 4. Let it be. Let it be. Let it be. Let it be. I'm putting the main notes in between the main notes. Okay? Sorry, the melody in between the main beats. We then went on and we looked at a jazz musician, okay, who would kind of, a famous jazz musician. In this case, Miles Davis. All the information you need is there. I'm not going to start going through every pages of this, every word of this here. But we looked at Miles Davis because he is, his music, he's one of the most famous jazz musicians that ever lived. A pioneering jazz musician. He kind of moved jazz in different directions and really kind of pushed the art form on with an album called A Kind of Blue, a very famous, if not the most famous jazz album of all time. And we looked at a few videos of this. We took one song in particular, So What, which I'm not going to play in this, but this presentation is available on Teams, and it can be emailed to you. So please have a look at this, but you'll find it yourself, no problem, on YouTube. We listened to the recording of the actual original recording of So What. We then moved on and looked at a live performance of the same piece where we actually, move on there. I did not mean to play that. We then looked at the band playing this live, okay, and we saw the different instrumentation involved in jazz. One thing we haven't gotten into much there is the instrumentation very commonly used in jazz music, which is drums, bass, piano, saxophone, sometimes trumpet, and Miles Davis indeed is a trumpet player here, but I suppose the saxophone is a very prominent jazz instrument. Okay, so we then did a bit of prep. You can ignore that. Okay, now we then, before we actually took our own piece, Let It Be, and changed it from a pop song to a jazz song, we listened to a few really cool examples of other songs that have been changed. We listened to Jump by Van Halen, the original kind of rock version. We then listened to a version of it by Paul Anka, which is a jazz version of it, whereby he incorporates syncopation, there's improvisation in it. It's not strictly speaking 2-5-1 chord progression all the way through, but you get the idea. Okay, we also listened to Nirvana, Smells Like Teen Spirit, followed by the Paul Anka version as well. And we listened to one more as well. We did Mr. Brightside by The Killers, which he also did. Okay, again, I don't have time. I am limited in these recordings to 15 minutes, so we don't have time to listen to all those. Okay, we then listened in class to what the differences are. So with Let It Be, and I'm just going to play very quickly here a basic backing track of the original recording of Let It Be. This is not the Beatles version of it. I just want you to have a listen to this here. Sorry, go back to the start and hopefully you can hear it here. So, when I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom. Let it be. Okay, so I'm just kind of singing along there. It's probably a little bit high for me. But I suppose what I want you to hear there, the main thing, if I just isolate the drums alone here, you'll hear a kind of a straight rhythm. And this is the typical chord progression, by the way. So C, G, A minor, F. So in the key of C, that is 1, 5, 6, 4. And there it is, with a typical just kind of straight ahead drum beat. I'm going to sing it down the octave. When I find myself in times of trouble, and so on. Okay. Now we then change the underlying chords to D minor, G, C, C, which is 2-5-1 in the key of C, and we left the same instruments in. Put the piano back on, and the bass. Same chord structure, different chord structure. And watch, we're still going to be able to put the melody over it. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And I take the same melody. You might hear I move the words a little bit to the offbeats instead of playing on 1, 2, 3, 4. Therefore, I have syncopated the rhythm. I have used a 2-5-1 chord progression, and I have swung the rhythm on the drum. So you'll hear the rhythm on the drums. I just mute the rest of it here. What's this? Ti ti ta, ti ti ta, ti ti ta, instead of ti ti ta, ti ti ta, ti ti ta, and so on. Okay. So there you go, guys. Any questions, let me know. Email me, contact me in Teams, whatever it is you need to know through the YouTube channel and this YouTube tutorial. Again, you can post it in the comments if you want. Thanks very much, guys. Well done.